Consulting Growth Insights.
Hi, Mike. I'm good, thank you very much, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a little bit. Something I've been trying to do a little bit more recently is to have folks that have built successful firms who are not my clients come in and talk about how they did it, what they did, and kind of dissect some of their decisions, reverse engineer some of their decisions, um, and maybe look at and talk about how things could have been done better, differently, etc. So I am thankful that you're willing to kind of open the kimono, if you will, and talk about all that stuff.
Absolutely, and it's something that's been close to my heart. I've been as a founder, you're close to the idea of positioning and articulation of the value that your company provides. So it's something I've been wrestling with for 25 years, and it was never you never get you have phases where it fits, and so yeah, I'm really curious to
Yeah,
see what we could have done differently, what I can learn, and yeah, how can I can apply that in the
yeah,
future as well.
yeah. And then maybe really briefly, just to tell the listeners sort of the background you're coming from. You built
Mhm.
a successful boutique firm in the PLM space,
Yeah.
and I think remind me of the numbers. I think roughly 35 million. Is that right? If my notes
Yeah,
correctly.
it was. So I, at the time when I exited, it was around about between 250, 300 people. We had turnover was around 30 million, and we were growing 20% year on year. So it's
Yeah.
a yeah
So very
successful
very
company.
very healthy, very healthy, very successful. So that's
Yeah.
the background that you're
Mm.
that you are going to be speaking from, if you will. Um, well, there's a number of things I want to dive into with you, but before we hit record here, um, you brought up something kind of really interesting, which is that kind of when you start out as a founder of a firm, it's what you call pure, right? Like you're sort of open about things, you're learning, you're figuring things out, and then over time, again, using your words here, you kind of corrupt yourself and maybe become too professional and kind of lose um, both the brand and the language, but also potentially lose yourself as the founder within your own firm.
Mm.
Um, Talk about that a little bit, because I think that's a part that's I think often missed.
Yeah.
And one last thing I'll say out there is you see it. Like all you have to do is look at the homepage of most consulting firms, and it looks bland, looks the same. You couldn't tell them apart.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
Yeah. So, um, so when you first start the business, and there's small numbers of people, maybe even just yourself, um, I think it's quite clear what the work is because you're doing it. And if anyone asks you what you do, you can be very specific. I'm doing this thing over here, and it's quite narrow. And as you start to expand, if you're lucky, you get to do more of the same. But typically, what happens is you start to expand on the type of activity, and so the remit broadens, and then you start to think about how you're going to be a professional company. How do you describe what you do? Because you might then have to start speaking to people who don't haven't experienced it or haven't seen it, and so you start to think about the right business language to describe it, um, and over time, I think, as you mentioned, you can start to dilute the purity and the essence of what you're doing, and especially if you're starting to expand. Maybe you've had one service in the past and it becomes two or three or more, because you realize that you can do different elements of it, and perhaps it's called different things in different industries as well. And so you try and find these overarching terms like digital transformation or consulting, etc. But as you said, it becomes very generic, and it really no longer describes your unique value proposition. And then you go on a bit of a journey of discovery as well, because then you start to learn new industry terms. You'll speak to someone that's got more experience than you, and they'll say, "Oh, well, what you're doing is this," and so you might start to use that terminology too. Um, and it's only when you, I think, have been doing this for a number of years, where you start to then become confident in yourself, and really understand the true essence of the value that your organization brings. And then, if you're lucky, you can, yeah, determine the narrative, and the find the right words to describe, the uniqueness of yourself. A bit like, when a teenager comes out of, the teenage years, and they find themselves and who they are and their identity. Um, yeah,
Yeah, so there's a number of threads I'd love to pull on there. Maybe the first one, it's a little bit more unique, and it's something that I've been trying to push on with my clients and just in my content and whatnot more recently. But it's this need for a successful firm to really have strong alignment between the founder and who they are, like what their identity is, what their purpose is, and the essence of the firm, the positioning of the firm. Um, how did that go for you? Did you oftentimes it's not purposeful, honestly. Like that's why I push on it more often. But I'm curious, in your experience when you're building quick release,
yeah.
um, were you
Well,
thinking about that? How did that work out?
the I think the biggest, shift that we achieved in that logic, was when we established the company culture, because we were, someone at one point, someone told us, it was actually Ben Blomley, the CFO at the time. He said, culture eats, strategy for breakfast, and kind of explained, as we were growing quite quickly, and we had a lot of new people coming on board, and we weren't able to, interface with them all. We said, okay, we need to establish this, shared, culture, and so we went through this exercise to understand what made our culture, what made us who we are, and what is it the founder team do that, is the thing that we want everyone else in the company to do. And so then we, distilled it down to, four or five values that we then, um, embedded in the organization. And because those values came from the founder behavior anyway, it tended to be lived, rather than just something that was articulated. And actually that was something that the team really connected with. And then you would hear them, um, using that language and, actually applying it in terms of how they interacted with customers, how they interacted with themselves. Um, and that, I think, was one of the most, powerful forces in terms of, that founder alignment.
It's interesting because culture in many organizations tends to be performative, right? It's the you mentioned values, which I do want to dig into,
Mm,
but it's one of those. Okay, we're going to figure out what our values are. We're going to write them down. We're going to send them to everybody. It's going to be a poster on the wall kind of thing, and
mm,
nothing really gets done with it. But it sounds
mm.
like that wasn't the case for you. What was one value that really connected for you personally as a founder?
Well, all of them did. So, I'll give you an example, but, one, because we is a play on the words, or the play on the letters QR, right? So we had ones like, quick response, for example,
Mhm.
and that was all about customer focus, and the idea that, you get, when customers are contacting you and asking you for things, you get back to them quickly, because, you close the loop, so that the customer always feels informed. You're actually anticipating customer, requests, and so, by having that simple idea of customer service and customer responsiveness, it tells you all you need to know about, being mindful about the fact that you're working with customers, and the technical work has to get done, but there's a customer at the end of it that is buying that service, and you need to give them what they need.
Yeah. So what I mean when I hear that, my mind goes to the word speed in general. I mean the company name is also quick release.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was that purposeful, like was speed a core um value, if you will? Like was that the thing you were trying to get the firm known for, or was it something else?
Um, I think, if anything, it was un, unblocking. So the actual activity right at the very beginning, when I said, people asked me what we were doing, and that the activity was this thing called releasing. So it's design releasing. So in engineering, you release product information to downstream parties, and so we always used to say a quick release is a good release. And it was the idea of just information flow, and that you got things through the systems a lot quicker. But actually, it wasn't just speed, because you had to do things right as well. But the quick release, it's just something that it's a name that resonates with people,
Mhm.
and because it was linked to releasing, the idea was people would understand. Okay, we need a quick release. We need quick release, and Q and R come together in the alphabet. So Q and R are already kind of associated in terms of the letters, and it
Yeah.
just it just seemed to work. It resonated, and it was something that vibed. And therefore, there's that's why all the values came out of QR, because it just somehow it became part of the DNA, and people
Mhm.
got it, and it's easy to remember. And yeah.
Yeah. What were, I don't know if you remember all of them, but what were the other values?
So one of them was quality releasing. So that was the idea that the work we did, it was critical. Effectively, people who were building these complex products, whether it's planes, trains, or automobiles, and you had to have the right data quality, and you had to have things going through the right processes, etc. So quality was extremely important, and we wanted to be doing this better than anyone else. And that was effectively, part of our UVP. The fact that we were the company that people got in, because it wasn't working in the as it was. Um, then there was quality relationships as well. So not just between the team, but also with the customers and everyone. But we realised that even though we're in a technical environment, it was at least 50% human, and therefore the human element was core. Um, and the other one was quite refreshing. So the idea that we did things differently, and that came across in the way that we interacted with people, but also the way we approach problems, and the way we problem solved. Um, and there's another one now, and I'm going to get in trouble because I can't remember it. But I'll come back to it if I can.
That's all right. I
I
won't.
remember.
4 out of 5 is not bad
Yeah,
considering your exit
yeah,
was several years ago. So,
yeah.
okay. So if I were, if I were a prospective client, whatever, 3 years ago, let's say, and I had asked you what makes quick release different, how would you have responded to that?
Well, this is where it's challenging, because what I've found is that it depends who the person that's asking that question is. So um, we never had a single clear buyer, and I think whenever you're reading the startup handbook, it says find a single clear buyer, and articulate your
Yeah.
proposition around that person. But we we had engineering directors buying our services, we had manufacturing, we had program management, and it was and sometimes um, they might not be um, advanced in terms of the technical journey. So, for example, some people would be really like intimately connected with things like PLM, digital thread, etc. And others might never have heard of those terms, and they would be alien. So, one of the hardest things was to find something that could speak to people universally, but also it would resonate with the what they knew and their world. So that was a challenge, absolutely. But ultimately, the um, where I landed towards the end, and I don't think this is the answer, but it certainly resonated with people, was this idea of data plumbing, and being a data plumber, because people it resonated, people understood it, and you were talking about either architecturally creating the plumbing, or fixing the blockages, or you know connecting the broken plumbing, and so therefore people, the light bulb went on and said, all right. And then they started to think about how they would apply that plumber. If they've got a problem, they're already thinking about, okay, what, how would the plumber fix my problem.
Mm,
But sometimes it was, the challenge was, is that you had um, people that were experiencing pain, and they didn't even realize that we could be a solution to that pain, because they had assumptions about how that pain would be resolved. Many people thought that you would apply technology to resolve the pain. Some people think that you would just apply more engineers, and they hadn't even considered the idea of applying expert product data management support to fix problems. That wasn't, until they'd experienced it, it wasn't even on their radar
mhm.
as a solution. So sometimes you had to um, you know take people through the process of helping them to understand what the problem is, and the mechanics of it, in order to actually then present yourself as a solution.
Yeah. So how much, I'm curious, in your go-to-market activities, so marketing, business development, etc., um, were you then having to kind of reframe that problem for people, right?
It,
Because they were, like you said, they were thinking about it in a particular way,
yeah,
and your goal would have been to get them to think about it in another way, that's like, oh, you actually have a, what you have is a plumbing issue,
yeah,
right? So you need to solve that, and then that gets you the outcome that you want, right?
yeah. So it certainly feels like it was a constant journey of discovery. And every time you spoke to the challenge is that every time you speak to a different customer or a new customer, then that informs the way that you potentially articulate the value proposition. And if you're not careful, you could, iterate every week, how you're describing the company. And then you could, if you're not aligned as well, you could have different groups of people explaining what the company does differently, because they've got different experiences of what we've done. um, and so there's definitely tension between um, creating things and saying things that land with customers, versus being aligned and leveraging best practice, and leveraging the idea of kind of core assets. And because otherwise you have total divergence of material, and things like website. You might what you It's very rare that you have active um, um, evolution of the website. Typically, someone looks at it at some point and says, "Oh, crikey, this is way out of date," and then it takes 6 months to get updated. Um, and yeah, so the intro decks, etc., would be like fresher, but still, um, yeah. So there's lots of things to manage.
What were some of the critical decisions you remember making around kind of bringing that uh, value proposition to life, if you will? Because it's one thing to say, yeah,
Mm,
hey, we're data plumbers. You have a
mm,
plumbing issue, and if you fix it, you're gonna
yeah,
have this outcome. It's
yeah,
another thing to build the services, price the services, bring in the right people,
yeah.
all that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's so many different moving parts to it, and when I know that when some people talk about positioning, they think of it as a marketing exercise. But as you touched on there, we had to think about, okay, what services do we provide? What expertise do we need to have? What's our IP? Um, um, what do we need to be capable of? What does that? How do you explain that to then customers? Um, so yeah, absolutely. It was, and then you go through evolutions. So I've done some podcasts recently where I talked about the shift to value-based pricing, and the idea that in the early days we were talking about high performance product data management, and that was the thing. It was, but high performance product data management comes at a cost, and there's definitely value in it, but at some point people will say, do we need high performance data management, and how do we actually fix this ourselves so that we don't have to have external services helping us anymore, and then when you also link it to um, high ticket business outcomes, um, then that also completely changes the way that you articulate what you can do as a company, and um, you then, yeah, you start to use more consulting language sometimes.
Yeah. So what were some of those high ticket business outcomes that you were uh,
Oh,
connecting it to?
I mean, a 20 to 1 ROI in year on at least one of the projects we did, where I think the project was a million. We saved 21 million in year, and that was at least a 5 year project, I think. So we continue to deliver, um, and you're effectively re-engineering how the company operates, but from the inside and from the kind of bottom up. So you've got the team is kind of twofold. So part of them is operational, hands-on, doing the work side by side with the people in the organization. And while they're doing the work, they're figuring out the problems with it, the opportunities to improve it, and then they work with the strategic team, who then help to embed those improvements and leverage them on the next project or elsewhere in the business. So you're kind of embedding all of the yeah um, the proven improvements that you've been delivering. And you get direct feedback then of from the team, but also feedback in terms of the results. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing I mean with the big ticket on. And then you have sometimes the customer comes to you, because that was when the customer came to us with a problem, and they said, look, things are late, they're over budget, can you help us? And other times they say, have a look at this, to what extent do you think you can improve it? And then you figure it out then, and then you have to find out what the ROI is likely to be. And so that was having those two capabilities at the same time was also quite tricky, because sometimes you're approaching people and saying, look, we've got this high powered consulting capability, and at other times companies just wanted the operational support, and so you had to be able to speak to those two things, um, and yeah, and so
Well,
if you end up presenting everything to potential customers,
yeah.
they might also get overwhelmed, so you have to um, that's why we had one of the upsides of this consultative led selling approach that we adopted, was that you typically start off by understanding the challenges that the customer is experiencing, and then you can tailor the messaging according
Mhm.
to yeah, the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely there's you want a common, you know, position and value prop at the top. And then as you're having your conversations, that's
Yeah.
for the type of, high ticket consulting that you are selling. Um, you need to be able to be flexible enough. There needs to be it's frameworks rather than step by step processes, right? Like
Hmm.
not to say that there weren't any processes
Yeah.
involved. I'm sure there had to be, but it's modular in a way. One of the things that sticks out in my memory from it was a client I was working with a while ago, and he was telling me a story about how they took a prospective client out to dinner. They were wining and dining, and this is in the life sciences space, and he goes, he tells me that he's sitting next to I think it was the CEO of the organization. And the guy pulls him aside and he goes like, "Hey, look, I understand that you can do all these things. What are you really good at?" Right? Like it's the kind of what you're describing is that it's really important to have uh, be able to hang your hat on something specific, and
Mm,
that doesn't mean you can't have multiple services, but you have to have a reason to have the suite of services. You have to be able to explain and tell the story of, well, we're really good at this thing, and this is why these two services are there because they make us good at that thing and they allow us to
mm,
execute and provide that value that we're really good at providing.
mm,
Versus just the way you see a lot of consulting firms grow, and you can grow to a decent amount, but then you tend to stall. Is you just go, oh yeah, we can do this too, and we can do this too, and we can do this too, and then all of a sudden you don't have that story anymore. When somebody asks you, "What are you really good at?" You go, "Well, we're really good at this, and then also this, and then also this," and they go, "Yeah, but what are you really good at?" Because everybody wants an answer to that question. Very few clients will ask it directly, like that
mm.
person did.
Yeah,
But they're all looking for that because everyone's been burned before.
yeah, yeah.
So I find that really interesting. What was the story that you were telling? Like, um, what was that connection point between, well, high value consulting and, operational, help, if you will?
So the way we described it to the customers was the idea that how those two things are symbiotic. So we would say that you'd have a an operational team in there, turning the daily performance around and unblocking the data flows and improving data flows so that that benefited everyone in the organization ultimately, and it got projects back on track. And at the same time, that team was informing the strategic perspective and enabling then the strategic improvements. And likewise, you can have a strategic team come in and have a look, perform a diagnostic, and create a transformation roadmap. But then we had the the people power to actually then implement that and bring it to life. Because so many of the times
Mhm.
companies weren't able to bring these transformations to life because
Yeah.
it was a plan that the customer got handed, and then they had to try and do it themselves.
Mhm.
um, yeah,
Well, I'm curious, did you start with the strategy consulting and then layer in the implementation, or the other way
other way
around, or
around.
both?
No, it's the other way around. We started off with the
Interesting.
the operational support and the professional services, and then at some point a guy called Ian Quest that we were close to saw what we were doing, and he came from a consulting background, and he said, "Hey, look, what this capability is something that all companies need, and we've done a number of projects where what you do is the thing that would have really helped. And did you realize that you can actually have a huge impact on company performance, and there's real value there."
That's interesting because a lot of the time, um, what what I've seen and what I've seen happen in, boutique firms is they go after the implementation and execution too soon, where they don't have enough scale, right? And that's where they tend to be competing with, the big firms that have, thousands of employees and bodies they can put on a project
Mm,
from an
mm.
execution perspective. How did you navigate that?
Well, we've already had that. Sorry, always had that engine. We always had that capability, and actually we knew how to scale it, and so that was part of our DNA. So we often kind of led with that type of thinking, where we were already thinking about how you bring this to life, and
Mm.
uh,
But I mean, practically though, like, sorry to interrupt, but like
mm,
practically from a scale of an implementation perspective, right? You're talking about embedding, engineers and whatnot
mhm.
within your clients. Um, there's just sheer numbers. When you're starting out and you're a firm of whatever 10 or
Mm.
something or 20, there's only so much of that you can do before you don't have enough capacity,
Yeah,
right?
okay, that's true. And yeah, and in the early days, especially where you're a small company, everyone is critical that those people are the very best expression of what you can do as a company, because your reputation in the early days
Hmm.
is the thing that counts so much. And if you won't have the hiring experience that you have later on, and so there is high risk, high volatility, um, and whether it is by luck or design, but we had a core team of very, very, very good people that then became the foundation. And so, for example, every engagement had one of these people in there that was then the rock, if you like, that we built the
Hmm.
team around them. um, but I think the trick is to discover what is the right form of talent acquisition very early on, so that you can you know have assured quality on the
Hmm.
people that you're bringing into the organization. And and also that means being ready to exit people from the business as well, if they're not if it's not working.
Yeah. So that's actually that's a good one to dig into a bit because like we talked about, a few minutes ago, positioning is not just a marketing exercise. It's pure business strategy across
Mm,
literally every function. Um, and when you're hiring, one of the like a common mistake I see is they hire based on pedigree. Oh, you worked at Deloitte or McKinsey or Accenture, great. We're gonna want you,
yeah.
right? Which I'm not saying that's a bad strategy. It could be. It depends on who your client is, etc. But oftentimes that's not that alone is not the thing that makes them successful within your boutique organization. So, and then layer onto that the idea that we talked about early on, which is okay, there's the core values, there's the position that we're trying to like, we want to be seen in a particular way in the market. The people we bring on need to support that.
Mm.
So, how did you think about that? What was your hiring strategy?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that made it unique, and something I think we're really proud of, and we've had such good feedback as well from not from the clients that work with our team, but also the candidates themselves. Where they've many of them took the time to message the team and thank them for the great experience. But so it was actually a real challenge finding people in the beginning, because for example, we assume that if you have engineers, they are the right people to be doing that type of work. But we quickly discovered that actually, if you have engineers, what they tend to do is using it as a springboard in order to get into engineering. And so we had a high turnover um, because they want to go and work for our clients. So and they weren't always the best at the work we were doing as well. So um, we you, and we kind of went back to culture and said, okay, what do we want in these people, and what are our cultural values, because they ultimately define what we're looking for in people. And so we created a selection day um, that was structured around validating capabilities, etc. But we were also looking for for example, how are people with relationships? How do they get on with other people at the selection day? How do they get on with us? How responsive are they? Can we imagine them being in front of a customer? And so you run these exercises, you have these tests, but more than that, you're looking at the the fit and the vibe that they're bringing as well. And so we didn't care so much about their CV. We had people that were historians, biologists, chemists. I think as long as they had this um, ability to understand this concept of product data flow and complex data and transition through systems and processes. And if they had that abstract capability, then that was yeah, it really didn't matter what was on the CV. Um, And in terms of the interesting thing that or the part of the secret source of talent acquisition was, we actually worked with a consultancy company that we took the people that didn't make it through their selection. So this company, this consultant was very, very, hard nosed. They had the kind of real alpha type characters, and that wasn't the type of people we were looking for. But actually, we were looking for the people that didn't meet that requirement in them. And so the people that we got from them were super bright, but also super lovely, and kind of gentle, thoughtful, emotionally intelligent people who weren't pushy or bullish, and they were real collaborators. And so that fitted our culture perfectly. So that was kind of one way that, and it was a win-win as well, because we got introduced to these people that had met some criteria, and yeah, it, so it was
That's
a
very
cool.
interesting because so you were able to find people that had the technical skill, right? Because,
Hmm.
and if I'm understanding right, it was a call it semi-formal arrangement where they would send you people who they
Yeah,
thought were good but didn't fit their alpha culture,
exactly.
but they were
Yeah.
technically capable.
Technically capable, and,
Yeah.
and, and like, so very, very bright, very kind of almost high end consultants, but they just didn't have the killer attitude. But actually, we didn't want
Mhm.
the killer alpha individual attitude. We wanted team players, and people that were very collaborative and very supportive, and that
Mhm.
looked for the collective win
Yep.
rather than the individual win.
Yep. Well, and that speaks to a lot of the values you were describing, right? So
Mm,
relationships, obviously, but then uh, I'm guessing that the quite refreshing part is also part of that, right? And I think the diverse backgrounds probably supports that as well. I don't know if that was purposeful or not, but um, a
um,
lot of if that's the thing that's valued in those environments, right? The a lot of kind of traditional firms, that would have hired the engineers, right? They would have been
yeah,
fairly. I'm not trying to say that every engineer is the same, but there is a kind of a similar quality, right, and their backgrounds and whatnot.
yeah,
Um, but if you have the historians and the biologists and whatever,
yeah.
right, that makes client conversations more interesting. That gives a diverse kind of view on how to look at data and information.
uh, yeah.
Um,
Because if you think about it, we when we leave school, we've got some innate capabilities, and there's things we
mhm,
gravitate to, and I think it, it's, if you go into any field, you could probably find the thing that you're doing now within any field, and but ultimately it's just because you work for an oil drilling company, it doesn't mean to say that you're an oil drilling person. You might be in the marketing department, or you might be in the HR department, and your focus is people, or and I think where it was a challenge is when you put people in front of customers, and the customer is then saying, hold on a minute, why have I got a biologist here solving my engineering problem? Surely this person is not qualified. And sometimes um, it would positively surprise customers when they've been working with them for a few months and impressed with the delivery, and then they find out that they haven't got any engineering background. um, so, but if they, before they've seen the person deliver, I've seen some customers question the CVs of the
mhm.
people that they're on the project.
How did you? Well, that's an interesting one. How did you handle that, right? Because from a buying perspective,
Mm,
if I'm being presented with a team of, hey, here's the 5 people that are going to work
yeah,
on your project, and I look at their LinkedIn profiles, their CVs or whatnot,
yeah,
and there's not an engineer on that list, I potentially view that as a risky proposition for me, right?
Of
So how
course,
did
yeah,
you
yeah.
how did you get around that, right? Because the uh, perceived risk is probably the biggest gap that goes unaddressed, and
Mm.
that is the biggest reason why deals don't close.
So I guess this plays into a little bit at the positioning narrative, in the sense that because the company was built around this unique value proposition, and we had this the recruitment and the selection process, and then we had this thing called boot camp, which was when people joined. It was initially 4 weeks of residential training and learning and development and capability building within the individuals, and so they and then subsequent learning and development, and the project matching was based around individual capabilities and the right fit for the project, and so we had high confidence that the individuals were the right people to be delivering on those projects, and
Mhm.
so it didn't, it didn't make, it wasn't a magic wand where you explain, how the individuals got there, and why they are trusted, and that every project we deliver and every engagement comes quality guaranteed. um, but the and all, and it links back to the point I mentioned earlier on, where it's almost deconstructing how people think about problems, and so, um, when what was that phrase about the, if you got a hammer, everything looks like a nail,
Everything's a nail,
and
yeah.
yeah, and yeah, so for some customers, they were just used to, having engineers fix problems, and actually
Mhm.
these problems could be better solved by people with different skill sets and different ways of thinking, and people with different backgrounds.
Mhm.
So it was we typically we had a trusted relationship with the customers. I think we'd established that through the sales process,
Mhm.
and so
Okay.
there wasn't any instances where we got turned away.
Mhm.
And after a couple of weeks of experiencing the team, we would have positive feedback to say, actually, yeah, thanks.
Mhm.
This is the right team, and yeah, I get it now.
Were you during the sales process? Were you bringing in the at least some of the potential team members into the conversations as the sales process progressed?
Where relevant, I mean, see, there's always a challenge around resourcing projects, and so
Yeah.
you might have some of the leads involved, you might have some of the SMEs, joining to talk to the customers about specifics, um, but typically um, the, the customer wouldn't find out about the makeup of the team,
Mm.
um,
Interesting.
because there's always a lag on raising the purchase order, and
Mhm.
quite quite often when you've got two companies you're speaking to at the same time, in a similar geography with similar skill sets, you might even have to say to the customers, look, we've got your dream team, but there's another opportunity, and if we can't get the purchase order through in time, then it's going to delay the start, because we will need to um, um, uh, get your team from somewhere.
Yep. Yep. So what you mentioned you'd built up the trust through the sales process so that
Yeah.
this particular thing didn't really get questioned as much. Um, I I tend to talk about the sales process being like a demo, right? If you're in software sales, like you give the demo and people get to try out the product, right? This is I view sales as that. It's their um first and only really ability to feel what it's going to be like to work with you
Yeah.
before signing the
Yeah.
PO, right? So what were you doing in that process that allowed them to kind of have this um, that allowed you to de-risk that portion of it
Mm.
of like, well, there's not an engineer here, and you go, it's okay, trust me, right? Like
Mm.
that's really the pitch, if you will, that you
Yeah.
described. I'm simple oversimplifying, of course, but
Yeah. the so the I mentioned the consultative selling approach. So you take the time to understand, the customer's challenges. What are the issues? What are the consequences that are caused from those issues, and what is the value in terms of fixing them, or what is it costing them, and what is the value of fixing them, and then I, I think curiosity and questioning and the right type of questions goes a long way to giving someone confidence, because if you're asking the right questions and you're surfacing the right themes, then they know that you know what you're talking about. And then when you get into the stage of putting together the proposal for how you'd approach this, I think that also gives them a sense of confidence, because it seems to be a common sense approach, or the type of approach that will deliver results. And then you can refer to where you've done this before, and we're always happy for the customers to talk to other customers that have experienced working with us, and that also goes a long way to giving the customer confidence. But there's always the first project with a new customer, and there's second, third project and project expansions are a lot easier, because then they've got experience of working with you. But the first one, there's always I'd say a little bit of risk from the customer side, and that's why I love your narrative around the becoming a safe proposition.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you, there's not been a single, um, qualitative research project, and I do one for, we interview prospective buyers, or non-customer
Hmm.
buyers, for every positioning project I do, and I've done hundreds at this point across a variety of industries. Not a single one that I can think of did at least one person not say, "Yeah, I wouldn't do X because it's too risky for me personally." That personal risk is so important. It's not even like it's not even just, is this going to work for my organization? It's, am I going to get fired if this goes wrong?
Yeah.
And like literally, I've had people say literally things like, "Oh yeah, I did it. I hired them this time because it was under $250,000, and that was a risk I'm willing to take. Anything over that, I'm bringing in a big firm, right? Like that kind of thing,
Mm,
right? So they'll put numbers to it, like literal
mm,
budget numbers. They go, "Yep, anything below this, I'll take a little bit more risk.
yeah.
Anything above this, nope. Even though I know this other firm might be better, I'm still going to go with the
Yeah.
less risky option for me for
Yeah.
whatever reason that is."
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's we saw that with ourselves as well. Sometimes we were screaming to our customers, "Look, we can see that there's value to be had here. There's millions you could be saving." And
Yep.
um, the, in the early days, we probably got ignored, because they assumed if you weren't in one of the big four or another one of the consultancies, then there's no way you could do it. But after time, we established the reputation and the credibility, and then we were seen as a credible alternative. But it's still yeah, a challenge. And we see that with technology selections within our customers, where they
Hmm.
would take the safe bet and go for a large technology vendor, because there's less perceived risk, even though that might not necessarily be the right choice, and it won't deliver the right outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it happens all the time, more than I
Mm,
think any of us are willing to admit, even. Or,
yeah,
I mean, a lot of us just don't know, right? Because it happens behind closed doors. You don't
yeah,
know what they're saying.
yeah. And that's coming back to the point around human behavior. Why it's one of our values, because you're working with people. People are selecting to work with you, and you have to reach the human, and address the human concerns. It's not like people look at in a black and white
Mhm.
response to bids, etc., and making um, a um, a pure selection.
Yeah,
There's always human emotions at play.
yeah, yeah. What is maybe to kind of wrap up our conversation? What is something um, else that's maybe counterintuitive, or like a critical decision you can remember that you made that um, to, to help bring the value proposition, the positioning to life?
That's yeah. Um, I think there's some things I've so where high risk strategies were playful and fun strategies. So I remember we did this merchandising, which was we called it bombfetamine because we worked a lot with bill of material, and that's described as bomb. And
Hmm.
bombfetamine sounds like a medical name, and so we created these. You can get these chewing gum packets that look like medicine packets, and so we called it bombfetamine. We said for engineering headaches and all, as you create and it seemed quite silly or trivial at the time, but actually that was one of the things that resonated most with customers, and so people are still now showing me, I'll be in meetings and they'll pick it up and they'll show me the packet that they've had on their desk, because it really does speak to the very human day-to-day
Yeah,
reality, and the pain, the idea of these people going, oh my god, why is this so hard, why,
yeah.
and so I think those the times when we've not been professional or taken fun risks, that's actually the stuff that seems to be
Mm.
most successful.
I, I love that example because it in many firms they are uh, very stale, if you will, right?
Hmm.
It's overly professional. And I think there's this common thing like, oh, well, you know, we're selling to hospitals. Hospitals are professional. Or we're selling to banks. Banks are professional. Like, but the reality is, people are people, and yes, there are different spectrums. Like, I
Yeah,
wouldn't put a software engineer or whatnot on the same point of the spectrum as a bank CFO or
yeah.
something, right? The latter is going to be much more conservative as a general rule. But uh, what you described, the important part also to me is that it again goes back to your values, which are a critical
Mm,
part of your positioning, right? That's
mm,
that's a very refreshing take, right? And it goes to building that relationship,
mm,
right? And not to mention from just a strict marketing perspective, it's memorable and it's distinct.
yeah. And the other one was I don't I'm probably not allowed to swear on here, but it was
Oh, you can do whatever you want. I don't care.
it was the idea of you asked me like how to distill what we did into a simple sentence, and at some point someone turned around to me, I think it was a customer or a partner, and said, so what you're telling me is that you unfrick our data, and it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's it. We unfuck your data, and and that was if just in a few
Mhm.
words you conveyed what you're there to do and the value that you
Yeah.
bring, and yeah, uh,
Well, and then you can also, again, I can easily make the argument that um, that speaks to the data plumber, if you will,
hmm,
right? It's a
yeah,
whenever you mention plumbing, I think everybody has a picture in their minds of
yeah,
what that looks like, and it's
yeah,
not pretty, and
yeah,
there's shit everywhere,
yeah.
So I think
and
that makes a
and the
ton of
thing,
sense, and I think that also speaks to using. I don't again, you can't remember whether it was a client or a partner, but
mm,
if it was a client, I mean, that's using
mm,
client language. That's really important. That's how they think about it. That's how they think
yeah.
about the value you bring.
But I think you'll like to hear this, but I think the external perspectives are so valuable, and you when you're in your company and you're trying to decide, on your positioning and how to articulate your value, you often can't see the wood for the trees, because it takes explaining it to someone else, and someone else asking you, and challenging you, and helping you to find that. And I think so. I definitely see the value in outside support. And so people like yourself that can bring that. And just quickly, jumping back to the point with the more fun side of things, I think if you're I think you can be fun if you're a credible company who's clearly capable, and they know that you're not just messing around, but you can deliver. Then I think that you can afford to
Mhm.
be more playful, um, in the way that you articulate what you do.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was very recently. I was in a meeting with a client. We were working in the middle of the positioning workshop itself, and the CEO brought up a kind of an analogy that he uses internally, and then very quickly after that, he goes, "But we can't say that to our clients. We can't tell them their baby's ugly." And I go, "Why not? Why can't we? For that matter, don't we want like you have to do like yes, there's a right way to do it,
Yeah.
but if we're going to be afraid to kind of say things the way they are, and we're going to water everything down,
Mm,
what's the value in that?"
mm,
And again, in their case, they happen to be a practitioner led firm. I'm like, that fact allows you to speak this way. You've been on their side. It's
mm.
one thing to have whatever somebody that came from academia or something like that, started a consulting firm, and now is out there telling everybody that their baby's ugly. And you're like, okay, but who are you? Whatever. But it's like, no, I've been on your side. My baby was ugly too, and so was yours. It's like you can have that conversation.
Yeah.
But it takes people like in a lot of these instances, it feels like it takes an outsider to tell them, no, 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 it's okay. You can do that.
Yeah.
Um, I think you've shared a lot of great things. Again, we didn't, hopefully for the people listening, we didn't really talk a ton about the traditional marketing and business. We talked about business development a little bit.
Mm.
But when it comes to positioning, it's all the other stuff that's so important. So thank you for sharing that. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to touch on, or anything you want to ask me for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, what's the process? If I could go back in time, and I'd got you
Yeah.
on board like 10 years ago, and said that, okay, we need help. Like, what's the process? How do you take companies through the journey to find the right
Yeah.
positioning strategy?
So it's my answer to that has changed over the last, call it 6 to 12 months, a little bit.
Hmm.
And that first part we talked about, this idea of aligning the firm, or better yet, aligning the founder themselves better to the firm and to the market reality, is where I push a lot more right now.
Have you
Because
have you found?
most people come to me and go, "Oh, I need marketing strategy help. I need, we're
Yeah,
thinking about positioning, we're thinking about messaging," and
yeah,
forget the fact that they use words like positioning and messaging
yeah,
oftentimes
yeah.
interchangeably, which it's not. But it's really getting into um, the essence of the person, the founder, and like in most firms I work with tend to be a founder plus a partner or two or co-founders.
Hmm.
And it's really important to do that deep introspective work and understand like what is your purpose? Not just why did you start the firm, but why do you do what you do in general
Mm,
as a person? Who are you as a person? And
mm,
you know, and then what is your intent with this business, et cetera, right? Because that's the other thing too is a common question I'll ask in discovery before we even sign anything is like, well, what's your end game? Like, I
mm,
want to know because the things that we're going to do from a positioning perspective, everything is going to be different if your goal is to, you know, grow at 10% a year for the next 20 years and then pass this on to your,
mm,
to the next generation, if you will, versus if you're planning on growing 20 to 30% a year for the next 5 and exiting.
mm,
Those are very different intents. And then, so that's a big part. And then the other big thing, which you and I talked, I think, a decent amount about, is understanding that gap between how do you want to be seen in the market and what do you want to deliver to the market, and how does the market actually see you, and oftentimes the broader category that you're in, and what do they actually need, and identifying what does that gap look like and how do we
Mm,
close it while also maintaining um, the founder at the center and not deviating and building something that the founder no longer resonates with 2 years from
interesting. And then I guess at some point,
now.
because that's one of the challenges with consultancy companies, where the success is too bound to the founder, and or it's too wedded to the
Mm,
founder. So I guess at some point, so you need to kind of almost extract and distill what it is that the founder, the secret sauce, if you like, that's been
yeah,
the success of the company, and then
yep,
embed that systematically into the organization.
yeah. Well, so that's actually a really important thing because um, the what I advise on and push on is not to build the firm around the founder per se. Now, sure, at the beginnings, you can't get around it. Founder led sales and etc. But as the firm scales, whatever, past 10, 20, 30 employees,
Yeah.
it's it's not about keeping the founder at the center, but it's about keeping the firm aligned to uh, what the founder's objectives are.
Mm,
Right. That doesn't mean that you avoid creating IP and distilling it across the organization and bringing in the right people that can,
mm,
run the company, and the founder can pull out of the things they want to pull out of, etc. Um, so there's a difference between alignment and keeping the founder at the center,
yeah.
and that is important because on the flip side, I've worked with firms that are the opposite, right? And I still remember this conversation. I had somebody that came to me, um, and their goal was, hey, within the next, I can't remember, 2 or 3 years, I want to exit, and I don't want an earn out, I want cash, and I want out. And I looked at his firm, and I'm like, there's absolutely no way. Like, your name is on the firm, all the business development comes from you, all your face and your name are on the podcast. It's on all the materials. Like, there's the firm as you.
Mm,
No one is buying this and not giving you an earnout at
mm,
minimum. And it's probably not the 2 years that are typical. It's probably three at least.
yeah.
And it's, the multiple is not going to be what you want it to be. Like, so I've seen the other side of it, and you have to be careful and kind of thread that needle for sure.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, great. Interesting. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Been
Well,
good talking
thank
to you.
you. Thank you for asking. You let me do the pitch. So, what are you doing now, Robin? Where can people find you if they got
Yeah.
questions or they want to chat?
So I guess the easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn, where you'll see me talking about diverse topics, and if those topics resonate with you, then reach out to me.
Awesome. And what are you doing now that you're have a successful exit under your belt?
So for a long time, I was prioritizing the family after 20 years
Yep.
of the company being the priority, and now I'm starting to. I've got a few projects that I'm working on, and there's the equity Sherpas. There's a tech startup which will go public within the coming weeks, and I'm still. Active in the PLM space as well. So there's lots of interesting things happening, and it's all somehow holistic. It informs each other, which is nice.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, best of luck on the new venture once
Thank
it
you.
goes live,
Yeah,
and really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge and experience.
absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
All right.
Appreciate it. Good
Thanks,
talking to you.
everyone.